The Witcher 3 Next Gen version is here, at least probably. Depending on when you're watching this video, the update has probably released. Here's a nice little map as to when it's going to release in your region. CDPR was kind enough to give me an early review build of the game, so in this video, I'm going to tell you about all of the new things coming with this update, as well as my impressions of it. And spoiler, I was kind of blown away by this thing. One slight piece of confusion I've been seeing with a lot of people leading up to the Next Gen update's release is what this actually is, or how to get the Next Gen version. This is just an update to The Witcher 3. You don't even have to own the DLCs as far as I could tell. If you just own the base game, you will get the Next Gen update totally for free applied to your game like a regular game update. There's no additional cost and your saves will be compatible. Although of course you do need a Next Gen console or PC to actually use some of the Next Gen features. Which, speaking of course the biggest change that's going to be coming with this update is on the visual side, and this is a seriously massive improvement. The vast majority of what you're going to be seeing in the background as far as gameplay is The Witcher 3 Next Gen maxed out on a PC. There's going to be a variety of changes at play here, and some of these features are going to be PC exclusive. So if you are watching as a console user, just note if I specify it's on PC or not. I'll always try and specify if one of the features is only for PC players. But many of the miscellaneous changes will apply to both Next Gen and PC. One of the biggest new features is ray tracing was added to the game, and on PC there's even some extra options for ray trace shadows and ray traced reflections. In addition, nearly all of the main characters have had their textures upscaled and shadows overhauled. So you're going to start to notice character faces, and even some of the armors or outfits in the game are going to look better and higher quality. There's also going to be a ton of miscellaneous visual changes that together will really add up to be a larger overhaul to the game world overall. New sky textures and even some new weathers were added to the game, so visually things as you look up will look better. Both vegetation and water were massively improved visually, as well as LOD and draw distance got a pretty big update with this. You'll not only be able to see things further away, but even the things in the distance will now be more detailed and in general look better. And even beyond all of this, a bunch of visual mods were actually incorporated into the base game now. So things like the Witcher 3 HD Reworked project and HD Monsters Reworked were actually added to the base game. The authors behind these mods actually got some payment from CDPR, now their name is in the credits of the game. And what this will mean is, as you're walking around, some of the miscellaneous things in the world will have texture improvements. This ranging from some of the enemies you're going to encounter and fight, but also just other things like buildings or miscellaneous clothing on NPCs. And a lot of this is really high quality. There's a new photo mode, which we'll talk a bit about later. And with this, you could zoom into some of these armors or outfits and notice there is just an incredibly high level of detail here. But also when you look out even further, the draw distance was one of the most notable upgrades that I felt with the Next Gen version. This being most notable with foliage and being able to see smoke off in the distance, which you're going to see smoke off in the distance all the time now. Playing The Witcher 3 versus The Witcher 3 Next Gen almost feels like you got glasses and are actually able to see things far away. It's really a huge improvement. But for PC users, there's going to be some extra options with Ultra Plus quality settings. This will give you the ability to increase things even further. Some of the bonuses I mentioned are behind some of the Ultra Plus settings and in turn only going to be on PC. So the reason my terrain and my water look so good is because I'm using these settings and they won't look quite as good on console, even though they'll still look better than they did previously on console. But some of these Ultra Plus settings will actually impact other things like how many background characters will be rendered in some of the cities. I know if this sounds great, but how does it actually come together to look? Well, for me, I think this was really phenomenal. Probably one of the best next-gen upgrades I've seen for a game, at least in recent memory. The Witcher 3 already looked pretty good. This is how it looked just playing normally the vanilla game before the next-gen upgrade. But I would say this next-gen upgrade really just took things to a whole different level. There are going to be many times when you're playing this update for the game where you're just riding around on Roach or walking and you will stop to take it all in. There was more than one time where I stopped and just looked off and noticed how many details I could see on some of the castles or the mountains or the trees in the distance. But the foliage overhaul was actually a pretty big impact when just riding around and playing in general. You'll really notice terrain differences and in general just an increase in the lushness of the world. The ray trace lighting of course will also stand out. I compared the intro sequence of the game with the next gen version versus the original, and you could immediately notice the lighting benefits from ray tracing. In the old version of The Witcher 3, the light just kind of illuminates everything around it without much distinction. While in the next gen version with ray tracing, you're going to have much higher contrast between things things that are actually lit versus things that are not actually lit. And overall, see a much different and more dynamic impact of the lighting. And I feel like what is the largest testament to how much I enjoyed the visual side of this next gen update, there was numerous times when I was filming this video and playing around in the game and I stopped to take a picture and then share it with a bunch of people on Discord to brag about how good the game looked and how fortunate I was to be able to play it a bit early. But of course, most of what you're seeing is the most ideal settings on PC. If you're playing on console, some of these benefits will apply, but not all of them. I did not test a console version for this video, but Digital Foundry has a phenomenal video on the console version, and frankly would be better than any video I would make on it. And although you can get ray tracing on console as well as a bunch of the other upgrades, this will come at a cost. If you want ray tracing on in a quality mode, you'll be locked at 30 FPS. Alternatively, you could turn it off and get the full smooth 60, which I think I would honestly prefer a lot of the times. And in general, you could just tell the visual fidelity is a clear step lower on consoles compared to the next gen version on PC, which is to be expected. That's not actually a bad thing, because at the same time, it's still a huge upgrade over what we had previously with The Witcher 3. Although I definitely think there's going to be some people out there having to make that hard decision as to play at 60 FPS or 30 FPS. But if you do have a somewhat decent PC and want to try out the next gen version, you can get the game right now for just $10 on GOG, and even use my affiliate code down below and I'll get a bit of a kickback. But even beyond all of that, it also brings FSR 2.1 to both PC and consoles, which is going to have a really nice performance boost for the game at a very small cost to visual fidelity, but almost an unnoticeable cost, and it's definitely a nice bonus. This will just be a flat bonus for console users out there, but if you're somebody who maybe doesn't have the latest and greatest from Nvidia, this also can be a really nice benefit and bonus for you, because FSR 2.1 does work on older Nvidia cards, even though DLSS 3.0 doesn't. This next gen version also does have DLSS 3.0, which I'm using in the background for all of my PC footage, and it was fine. Definitely a nice bonus if you're able to use it. And another really nice benefit with this update is pre-rendered cutscenes are largely going to be cut out of the game. This is going to be thanks to the mod Immersive Real-Time Cutscenes, which has been implemented into the base game now. And this comparison in the older version of The Witcher 3 I think is very telling. You'll notice here that I have a normal rendered cutscene. My game is rendering it in real time, so it's pretty smooth, just looks like the rest of the game as I'm playing. But then I cut to a pre-rendered cutscene, which I am not rendering in real time. All of a sudden things are much worse looking because it's rendered at a lower resolution that I was actually playing at, as well as it's locked to a lower FPS than I was playing at. So it looks bad, and honestly so bad that it almost takes you out of the game while playing at 4K and over 60 FPS. I was at 144 FPS. And then immediately cutting to 1080p 30 FPS was jarring. Thankfully, this is completely gone in the next gen version. Now, pretty much all of these cutscenes will be fully rendered in real time, and you'll have a smooth and consistent experience. It's one of those things that's really just a benefit that you probably won't even notice because you'll never have to worry about pre-rendered things again. And another bonus, especially for those TV players out there, is you could actually scale subtitle size with this new version. But as I mentioned earlier, one of the other big new features with this update is photo mode. You'll activate photo mode just with the hit of a hotkey, this being the U key on PC by default. And from there, you're going to have a full interactive photo mode, similar to how it works in other games, as well as a variety of options to adjust the lighting, as well as things like focus. And you can move the camera around so you get that perfect shot. It does have an interesting quirk compared to some other games' photo mode though, in that you must navigate all of these menus using keys. At least as far as I can tell on PC, that's how it works. So look, I can't actually use my mouse cursor to select a setting. The mouse is only for movement of the camera, and the way to actually change things like contrast is to use my keyboard keys, like the left and right arrow key. Overall, it's not the most powerful or feature-rich photo mode I have ever used, but at the same time, it's good enough for a free update and still more than powerful enough to take some absolutely incredible pictures in The Witcher 3. Not that I'm showing you in the background footage because I suck at using photo mode, but some other people will definitely take gorgeous photos with this, don't worry. This update also brings an alternate camera option, so you can choose either the default third-person view that The Witcher is known for, or this much closer and more zoomed in over-the-shoulder view. I found this to be a bit of an interesting one. It definitely makes things feel more cinematic, and you are more zoomed into the screen, so it's nice to notice some of the new details with the next-gen version. But sometimes when you're actually trying to play the game, it does feel a bit too zoomed in. Thankfully though, CDPR added this in a really nice way. So you'll be able to choose if your camera is in the default state or the more zoomed in state for 3 different things. That being general exploration, combat, or horseback. So you can make it so you have it more zoomed in as you're riding a horse, but the second you jump off the horse, it'll go back to the more zoomed out default camera. But then the second you get into to combat, it'll zoom back in again and give you that greater focus. I would actually argue this is the opposite way I would like to play. I actually preferred it more zoomed out on horseback and more zoomed out in combat, but when just generally exploring, I was fine with it being more zoomed in. But either way, it's a pretty nice feature. It's fully subjective and fully optional, so you don't have to use this at all if you don't want to. Although at least for me, it was on by default, so you may have to mess around with these settings to turn it off. There is a new default map filter that's going to hide a variety of the random things on the map, mostly those miscellaneous white markers, things like boats, bandit camps, and others. CDPR described how these were things you were supposed to just kind of find during exploration and did start to clutter the map because there were so many of them, although there is an all map option, so if you do want to see these all, you could just turn them back on, but again, by default, they won't be there. And there are a few other mods that were added into the base game. World map fixes is a pretty nice one. Sometimes bodies of water or other miscellaneous things in the world would not actually be reflected on the map. So you can see here, this body of water just wasn't on the map for one reason. This was fixed and now it's permanently fixed in the base game. Nitpicker's patch addresses a variety of other visual bugs that could occur in the game world. But what is by far going to be the most impactful of the mods added is FCR3 immersive and gameplay tweaks. This is going to basically be a large collection of tweaks to the game, and this mod is actually created by a dev of The Witcher 3. So it's going to do things like fix some immersion breaks, but also buff some items or abilities that dev felt like were undertuned. Which, okay, that's not inherently a bad thing, but I don't really know what was changed here, because not only did CDPR only add certain parts of this mod, like they mentioned how they curated some aspects of the mod and implemented those, but didn't actually add other aspects of the mod, but even further mentioned how for some of the changes, they took them even a bit further or tweaked the settings on those changes. So for example, some items may be buffed even more than they were originally in the mod, which again, all that's pretty much fine, except there's no actual changelog for any of those changes. I don't know which things are buffed or which things are even added from the mod. I didn't have time to test every single item or ability in the game, but likely in the next coming days, as the thousands of people that love The Witcher 3 get their hands on this, we'll start to learn more about what was actually changed. The takeaway here being, though, there are some balance changes seemingly with this update. I just don't really know what had its balancing changed. There's this really nice immersive option to hide your minimap and current objective when exploring. So basically, as you're just running around and not necessarily doing one thing or another, your minimap will be hidden, but you can press the Witcher Sense key and it will come back up for a few seconds until disappearing again. You can turn this on and off. It's another optional feature. Another pretty nice option for console players is the ability to control speed by how far forward you press the joystick. So you can see here, if I just push the joystick on my controller all the way forward, I'm doing a light jog. If I do it a little bit less, I'll be doing more of a walk, and if I do it just barely, I'm doing a slow walk. And you can click in the joystick to do a full-on run. Herbs in the game can now be instantly looted with a single interaction. You no longer have to actually open a loot menu to loot them. Cross progression was added to the game, so you can now load saves on consoles or load a save from a console on your PC. Quick casting sign seems to be a new feature for controller players. After you turn this on, you hold down one of the triggers, which is typically how you cast a sign, and then you'll see a bunch of additional options to hit in a second key to actually cast that sign. There's going to be some new armors to claim, as well as some appearance change-ups that you can apply to other characters, but as far as I can tell on the PC pre-release build, I couldn't actually activate them, or at least I couldn't find the settings to activate them, as well as there is going to be one new quest with rewards inspired from the Netflix show. I'm not going to spoil this quest for you because it is the one actual piece of new story content, so I figure you probably want to play it. You'll be able to begin it by just going to the Devil's Pit, and overall it's a pretty cool one, although relatively short. But even that wasn't quite everything. They have the generic line in the patch notes of added various other small fixes, tweaks, and quality of life changes, including a few secrets to be discovered by players. And they even nerfed fall damage, so you could actually fall from higher now without taking damage. I'll definitely have a video covering some of those other secrets in the coming weeks if you want to get subscribed for that. But overall, I think this next-gen upgrade is amazing. This is probably one of the best free next-gen updates I have ever seen for a game, or at least any game I've played. I did have a couple of bugs while recording this video, but one, I'm on a pre-release build, so those could actually end up getting fixed in a day one patch. And two, they were really minor. At some points, my foliage didn't actually spawn in. I just had to reload a save though, and it would spawn in. At some points, my mouse would just stop working. I couldn't move the mouse cursor, but literally just alt-tabbing would fix that. And definitely the strangest was this mountain pop out. I'm used to pop in, but this time the part of the mountain actually disappeared. There was the occasional pop in while recording this, but in general, I had an overwhelmingly smooth and visually pleasing experience with The Witcher 3 Next Gen, and I highly recommend you try it out. The Witcher 3 is one of the best video games of this generation that you can now have for $10, and it'll actually look like a modern AAA RPG thanks to these upgrades. And if you already own the game, you could play this for free, so I don't really need to convince you, do I? You just have to download it or put the disc in. But that said, hopefully you guys found this one informative, hopefully you enjoyed it as always, but until next time, I thank you all again for watching, and I hope to see you all later.